Welcome to Sigest, your fortnightly serving of digestible science from plant and food research.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Sigest. I'm your host, Hilary Ireland. Protection of intellectual property is a key step in the conversion of scientific findings into commercial benefits. Plant and food research within the Bioeconomy Science Institute has been generating value through intellectual asset protection for decades to become an IP expert in the New Zealand science sector. And piloting plant and food research through this transformation was recently retired intellectual property manager Sue Muggleston. Today we talk to Sue about the strategic IP management practices which have driven this transformation. Welcome to the podcast, Sue.
Thank you, Hilary. It's lovely to be here.
We recently learned about your fascinating career in a recent Science Life for Me episode. There we learned of your pivotal role in establishing strategic IP management at Plant and Food Research, along with the wider commercial team. Can you tell us about the role you played and the role your old team continues to play in IP management in the Plant and Food Research Group of the Bioeconomy Science Institute?
Yes, I guess our main role is to try to help curate the IP pipeline so that we can optimise our chances of getting commercial success. So in the past, it was very opportunistic and taking IP or results out of research once the research had finished and trying to make the best we could out of them, trying to commercialise them where we could. But we discovered then that invariably the IP had been compromised somewhere along the way. So either it had been published too soon, people had talked about it because they were excited about the science but hadn't really thought about what we wanted to do with it at the end. Maybe we had used methods and materials that required a licence or that perhaps were for research purposes only, so we just weren't able to take them forward. Also, there would have been lots of research, say, in one field that the research originated from. But when we came to commercialise, we discovered that the most value was in a completely different field, but we didn't have the information that was required to take it forward, and there was no further funding to be able to do that. So we really needed to change the way things happened so that we could actually guide the process from the start and just de-risk it, get rid of those things that were going to hinder us getting to success at the end.
So it plays a really important role in trying to protect the IP we generate for future commercial gain. So Plant and Food Research is known for its utilisation of plant variety rights, or PVRs, as a key method to protect the IP associated with the new plant cultivars it creates. And as an aside, we'll have a special episode on PVRs soon on Sigest. So how are PVRs different from other methods of IP protection?
So plant variety rights are just one of the many methods, and they only differ, I guess, because they relate to plant material, concrete plant material that needs to be moved around. So there's a very specialised process for handling those, whereas a lot of the other IP is around protecting those intangible things that we need to describe and manage in quite different ways. So hence it is a different process to manage them.
Okay. You mentioned that your team has played a key role in getting in early to the process so that you can make the most of the intellectual assets that are available. So when should a science team then start thinking about protecting intellectual property?
I think a science team needs to think about IP as soon as they possibly can, right at the early stages of putting together a project proposal. One example that I can give there is it was for a government research program, and it was all around using a particular enzyme in this process in the food area. And when we helped them check out the patent and literature, we discovered that there was already a lot of work and a patent on the enzyme that they had intended to use. But because we had found that very early on in the planning process, they were able to think about it differently, use a completely different enzyme that hadn't been used before, came up with a much better program and a much better science outcome. So just from understanding that early on, if they'd waited to discover that, the day before they were due to submit the funding proposal, would have been a very different outcome. So I think, the earlier you can get onto it, the better.
Gosh, that's a remarkable story. Really essential to be looking at the IP landscape at the same time that you're planning out your science, really. So then, from your experience, what is the ideal process or best practice for protecting an intellectual asset? Does it require quite a high degree of collaboration with the science teams and with yourselves as IP experts and commercialisation teams?
Yes, I think the best outcome comes when those three strands, the science, the business and the IP, are working very closely together and working in synchrony to get to that end product. And I think that starts right at the beginning because, as I said, we're starting to look at the patent landscapes. We're looking at the materials and methods that they are using and seeing who they're going to be working with, whether those are students or collaborators or other people, and making sure that you've got agreements and things in place. So you need the commercial people to be involved with doing those contracts. Sometimes we need to license in material or make sure that we have got the rights to be able to use things in the way that we want to. So doing that very early on is really important because then you can just be pretty sure that you are on the right track. But you do need to keep checking in because there's more patents get published all the time. There may something come up that you didn't find the first time round. You'll discover that as you continue to keep an eye on things. You might discover something completely different from what you'd expected in the first place. And then you'll need to think again about what's the IP strategy around that, what's the best way to protect it, and is it going to have a different commercial opportunity or is it going to enhance the one that you were already thinking about? So by working together with all of those streams working together, I think then you get the best result at the end.
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about the commercialisation side of things and all the different markets that you might want to apply the science in, presumably one organisation can't be the expert in identifying all the possible future applications of any given intellectual asset. So what role do partnerships play in strategic IP management?
Yeah, I think they're very important. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can start investigating how something might be used. And I think it's important that we always think beyond the field that we initially started in. So if it was something was found for controlling a disease in apples, then does it work on a whole lot of other diseases? Does it work on a whole lot of other crops as well? So trying to understand that. But in other areas, it might be something that you've developed as a tool for measuring something in horticulture, but actually the best use for it is in measuring something in the fishing industry or in medicine or something completely different. So we always have to ask the questions of how broadly, where could it possibly be used, and start thinking about that. A good example of an in-house collaboration with that was we had a technology that could be used for things like biofouling in fishing nets and things like that, but it had many other potential applications. So we did a bit of thinking about that, talking with scientists about where else it could be applied, and we had, I think there was about 4 different science groups in Plant and Food who helped to look into that to see if it would actually work in their fields. And so we did a lot of that in-house, but at the same time we were looking at the markets, and we can work through the Pre-Seed Accelerator Fund to access funds to, for example, get some market research done in the US for a particular product or a particular market segment that we're interested in. We also have accelerators, like, for example, the Sprout Accelerator. They have a program where they start helping teams look into potential markets and products, and they also can help do due diligence on the product and potential markets. So there's a lot of different ways that we can really investigate what might be the best way to take something forward.
Okay, sounds like a great ecosystem there in New Zealand. So it sounds like there's quite a few different ways to protect an intellectual asset. So what are the ways to protect IP, and how do you choose the best approach for each intellectual asset?
Basically, you are protecting your commercial position. So the idea is that it provides a fence to keep competitors out. So then you are starting to think about what might be the best way of protecting it in that particular environment. So if you have a particularly new, clever technology, then filing a patent on that would be good because it protects that concept no matter where it gets applied. And although it's the most expensive option, it gives you full legal protection over a 20-year period. So it's long and strong. But there may be situations where you haven't got something that is appropriate for patent protection, but you could decide to keep it a trade secret. So you might record a manual for how to do something, and that is kept confidential in many ways, and could be as far as locking it away when it's not in use and restricting the number of people who get to access it, etc. And then that keeps that part strong. Mm-hmm. Problem with trade secrets is once it's out, it's out. You can't bring a secret back, but it doesn't usually cost you anything to keep it a secret. So that's another way of doing it. And sort of touched on that with locking things away and controlling access. But if you've got a process in a factory, if someone could look through the window, see how everything's set up and work out how you're doing it, then that's actually not going to be a very good commercially secure position. So, if you can do that, then maybe you need to black out the windows and have certain areas of your facilities that people aren't able to access, those sorts of things. So really thinking about the practical side of things as well. There's things like trademarks that are more used to protect your reputation. So often when you start out, the trademark isn't worth anything because people don't recognise it or associate it with any particular product or service. But you build the value in that over time, and so that it relates to your business. And a trademark protection can be indefinite. So as long as you keep paying for the protection, it keeps going indefinitely. So you might start with a patent and a trademark. The patent is worth a lot more at the beginning because it gives you that 20-year protection and ability to keep people out. And then you have a trademark which isn't worth much at the beginning, but over time the trademark value increases considerably and the patent goes through its 20-year life cycle and disappears. But then you've got that reputational value in the trademark that people can, that is worth money as well. So you've got lots of different ways of doing that. Copyright exists in photographs or manuals or any of those sorts of things, computer code things. So there's, that exists in New Zealand at least, that exists on creation. So you just need to show that you intend to keep it as your copyright. So, it really is horses for courses. There's different tools depending on what it is that you have and how you intend to commercialise it.
And so what are some of the IP or commercial success stories that have come out of plant and food?
Well, there's a few examples that people might be aware of. We have Sentient Bio, which is a spin-out company that is built around sensing technologies that use insect receptors to do the sensing. There's also 2Before, also a spin-out company that has developed natural exercise performance products. And people may be aware of CaloCurb, which is a natural weight management product that, again, based on IP out of plant and food. And another one more specific to the horticultural industry is Oreo Gold. It is a biological control product that was originally developed for controlling PSA, the devastating disease in the kiwifruit industry, but now has potential application in a range of other crops and with other diseases as well. So, just a few of the many things that have come out.
Reflecting back on the best practice process and the different tools to protect and intellectual assets, were there any similarities in those success stories?
Not necessarily similarities, because they're all quite different technologies needing to be managed in different ways. I guess 2Before and Calikerb, the Amarasate product, were the most similar because they were based around natural products that are much, much harder to protect via patent, because most of them, like hops or berries or whatever, are known to have health-giving properties and have been used that way for many years. So in order to protect something, it has to be completely different and unexpected from what others have done. So finding smart ways of protecting key bits of the technology, I think, are the core to those.
So there's been a number of success stories, clearly, and you've touched on a few that have arisen out of Plant and Food's research efforts. So if a main aim of intellectual asset protection is to protect future commercial position, and yet IP protection has inherent uncertainty, how does one de-risk the process to ensure that there is a high conversion rate between IP protection efforts and eventual commercial benefits?
Yes, the million-dollar question. I think also is not just that the IP protection has that uncertainty, it's also commercialisation has the uncertainty as well. And it's often said that you need 100 ideas to get 10 worth pursuing to get one that's going to be a commercial success,
Right.
A big commercial success. You may get some others along the way as well. But that's indicating that you really do need a good pipeline. You need lots of ideas coming in. You need the assessment of them and the ability to choose some that are going to be worth pursuing and to be able to not pursue everything.
Right.
And then know that you need to have several irons in the fire, so to speak, in order to get one that is going to be really successful. And it's that whole portfolio approach. You're never going to get everything being successful. And so appreciating that from the start, that, it might not be making a lot of money, but if you've learned a whole lot of lessons along the way in how one commercialises in that area and what are the things that you would do differently or better the next time, then it is all part of that successful enterprise to get things coming out the other end. And so combining that with keeping the streams aligned that we talked about before and getting rid of as many of the pitfalls along the way that we talked about, the things that would compromise your position, then you're hopefully going to be in a much better position to get more things coming through that are successful.
It's an interesting frame to apply to a science organisation, an important one, that the sort of appreciation that not everything is going to be a winner, but there are important lessons learned in the full integrated endeavour.
And I think too that it's not a comment on the science. It might be excellent science, but just not have a commercial outcome in this manner at this time.
Right.
And so it's not making any critique on the science that's being done. It's just on the commercialisation of it at that time. And I guess that's quite a good segue into sort of the question of publication versus protection. And we often get the comment that, if we're following IP, we can't publish, which couldn't be further from the truth, because we actually want both to happen. It's just important to have them in the right order.
Right.
Because if you publish first, then your technology is no longer novel, so you won't be able to get protection on it. And if you file a patent, then once you have that reasonably strongly in place, then it's good often to be able to publish, to draw attention to the fact that you have got this new technology. So combining them is actually desirable. And I think sort of understanding what it is that you're trying to do, what you're trying to commercialise, will help you better understand what you want to publish, what you want to keep secret, and what you can publish after you've done some other things.
Okay, right. Yes, very important. Again, integrate the whole process from the beginning. Start early with the IP plan and really create that future long-term vision for the knowledge. So in some areas of research, the dollars and cents benefits and impact may not be so apparent. For instance, some research for public good or research at the basic end of the research pipeline. And we've touched on a few reasons why it's important to consider intellectual asset protection at the beginning, but looking at the whole research pipeline and areas with no obvious dollars and cents benefits at this time, why is it still really important to plan out the intellectual asset protection from the beginning and in the full pipeline and in all research areas?
Yes, I think so the whole research pipeline, as you say, from basic through to commercial is incredibly important. And the sorts of IP questions that I mentioned before about your commercial output and things are obviously not known at the very early stage research. But what we have started to do is to partway through a program or towards the end of a program start looking at doing an intellectual asset audit, which is basically looking at all of the bundles of knowledge that have been created in that research so that we can effectively capture them and so that we can manage them and be able to have that discussion about which ones might we take forward into an MB program, which might we invest in ourselves, which have got use for a client that we already know about, which ones are we going to publish, etc. But it gives us a way of saying, this is what we've got, these ones go together, and we're going to handle them in different ways going forward. And then you're feeding them into the next stage, which you've identified what those are going to be. And if it's, for example, doing an MB program, then you start doing the IP plans, you start to work out who you need to help you with, you're doing those patent landscape searches, working out which materials and methods are going to allow you to move forward. So again, making sure that things aren't compromised along the way. And you might not know what you're going to create, but you know the sort of things that you're going to create and you can manage it appropriately. And not everything is going to be commercialised. So say some things will be published. So we're always wanting to create impact and value for New Zealand. And if you're thinking about the publication side of things, if you have found a better way of growing a particular crop and you publish it, then the whole world benefits from that. And so where is the benefit to New Zealand from having the research funded by the New Zealand government? So to actually think about how you're going to manage that, you'd say, well, we're not going to publish it in the global publication system. We are going to have direct transfer to our growers, whether that's via their grower magazines or whether it's a field days or a seminar, some way that you can create that value for New Zealand growers, but not undermine them by letting the rest of the world know as well. Another area that often causes confusion in a similar sort of way is we're finding a biological control agent for a particular pest on growers' farms. And so we want all of the growers to have it, so we're just going to publish it. But in actual fact, in many cases, someone needs to make and supply the product that you're sending out, or grow and supply the product that's going out there. And if you have just published it, then there's going to be no incentive for any company to start making and selling it because all of their competitors can just do exactly the same. So in that situation, you would either keep it secret or, if it was appropriate, patent it, and then you can license it out to a company and make sure that it is supplied to the growers so that it can be used to create the value that you want. So you're always thinking about how can you manage it to get to the best possible impact, which may or may not include full commercialisation. Mm-hmm. Many of the things that we've been looking at more recently is getting extra value. So it's not things that are going directly to the growers, but things that resulting from our research that can be turned into spin-out companies or products and things that are used outside of our usual sectors. So creating extra value for New Zealand.
Phenomenal. So it's really quite an exciting area in terms of the potential value and impact that can be created from our research. And I think maybe it's been seen as a bit of a frightening change, moving towards a stronger focus on commercialisation. But really, it's about doing what's best for New Zealand, and it can come from all angles and in all areas of research, whether it's applied science or basic or research for public good. So it's certainly an exciting area and an exciting time for New Zealand science.
Absolutely.
So it's been suggested that scientists themselves should be independently compensated for IP they generate, and that's as opposed to the benefits being returned at an organisational level for reinvestment into science practices. So can you share your experience of navigating the two models and your thoughts on what is the best approach?
Yes, so quite some years ago we did bring in a IP rewards policy which would see the inventor have a certain share of the reward of the returns, and there was a small amount that would be also given to the commercialisation team. That was not successful at all, and in fact it caused all sorts of ill feeling. And if I can give an example there is, say it was a new plant variety that was developed, and you've got the breeder who was the inventor, and they were always going to be in that first position because that's what their role is. But just breeding something isn't going to make a commercial success. For something like that, you have a whole team of people who work out how best to grow it, when to harvest it, how best to store it, how to control the pests and diseases on it. You might have people doing the commercialisation side of things. There's a whole, basically half the company is involved in trying to make that a commercial success. So to give one person a personal reward for something that the whole company has been involved in making a success just really didn't work. And it also promoted some bad behaviours where people didn't want to collaborate with others that would have made it a better outcome because they would have had to have shared some of their reward. So it really wasn't working well. And I was on a working group that looked into recommendations about how we could handle that better. And along with that, there was some research that had been done that looked at what motivated people and people's values. And I think, if I remember rightly, the figures were 17% of people were motivated by financial gain, but 83% of people were motivated by fairness and sharing. And so you could argue that maybe it's the 17% of people who are going to be the most creative, and we want to incentivise them to come up with new inventions, and that would take us forward faster. But if you are going to upset more than 80% of your company by those that want to be fairly rewarded for the efforts that they have made in making something a success, I think that it's a pretty clear picture there. And we certainly looked at other ways that you could reward people through their performance reviews, and then you could be rewarded for all sorts of contributions to that commercial journey, not just the original inventor. So I think there's still work to be done on that, but I think that individual sharing of the returns doesn't really work for an organisation like ours, where you've got so many people involved in trying to get to commercial success.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely it takes a village of people, a lot of contributors to the success of each intellectual asset. Thinking further afield outside of the plant and food context, you have been President, trustee on the board, and long-standing member of LESANS, the Licensing Executive Society in the Australia New Zealand chapter. So how does LESANS contribute to the establishment of the best practice IP management in New Zealand, in the science sector, at Plant and Food, the other Crown Research Institutes?
Yes, so LESANS is a professional society for the commercialisation of IP globally. As you said, it's the Australia New Zealand is just one chapter of a global organisation. And it has a wide range of participants across the community, from IP practitioners, commercial lawyers, commercialisation managers, etc. So a whole range of different people across all of the IP, all the business sectors, if you like. And Plant and Food has a corporate membership to that, so that means that we're able to expose quite a large number of our people to many of the events that they have. And so we have membership, with our IP team, plant variety team, legal team, commercialisation managers can all participate in the events. There's an annual conference which brings together people from all around Australia and New Zealand, usually with a really good repertoire of speakers across all sorts of areas. We have webinars and seminars and training programs and things that are there to upskill people right across the industry. And it's a very sharing organisation, so sharing learnings and having discussion about new things, providing submissions to various government agencies and things. And also with that connection globally, there is LESANS, the LSI, the LS International have conferences, each of the countries and regions. So we're part of the Asia Pacific region, so there are conferences of those as well. And just connections to those people globally. If you're wanting to commercialise in countries you're not familiar with, reach out and get access to people who've got experience in those fields, and people have been very, very generous with working together to achieve common good. So I think it has been a very useful organisation to belong to.
Nice. It sounds like it's really contributing to a thriving ecosystem around IP management in New Zealand. Are there other ways that the Bioeconomy Science Institute can build off the thriving ecosystem through other channels, such as I think you've mentioned KiwiNet in the past?
Yes, so in New Zealand we have a developing and pretty thriving ecosystem around commercialisation. So KiwiNet, I think we touched on before, what is a commercialisation grouping of most of the CRIs and most of the universities who get together to try and support each other to make the best commercialisation investments and decisions to get new products and things out to market. We have the government-funded accelerator programs, which provide training and support and things around helping get those new products and companies out there. Another thing that KiwiNet does is each year they have the commercialisation awards, the research commercialisation awards in New Zealand, which is open to anybody across New Zealand who's been involved in research commercialisation. And this has awards in several different categories. The breakthrough innovator, so the early stage scientist who's getting into the commercialisation side of things. The researcher entrepreneur, which is the more career researcher doing commercialisation things. There is the Commercialisation Professional Award, the Breakthrough Project Award, which is new projects that are coming forward but have the potential to achieve great things, and also the Commercialisation Impact Award, which is those that have actually gone right through and are actually delivering great commercial success. So they have, KiwiNet has a website. If you're interested, you can go on and have a look, and they've got little summaries of many of the finalists that have come through over the years. So it's well worth a read.
Wow, it sounds like an inspirational read for sure, and wonderful to hear that there are so many different categories, so many different ways to celebrate research commercialisation. So the PFR group within the Bioeconomy Science Institute is widely considered an expert in IP, and that's in no small part due to your leadership and achievements over the years. So reflecting back, what is the PFR point of difference when it comes to strategic IP management?
I think the real difference is that ability to get involved as early as possible in all of our programs and right across the board where we can, getting that engagement of the science teams and the wider project teams as early as possible so that they can understand and be involved in the planning of how they're going to manage their intellectual assets, providing education that is often specific to their project and their stage and just give them the help and support that they need. And also being part of that wider ecosystem so that we're acknowledging that we can't do it all ourselves and that we get as much help and support as we can.
Wonderful. So it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today, Sue. Thank you for returning from retirement to share your expertise and learnings in this important area of strategic IP management. I'm certain I speak for the entire PFR family when I say thank you for your significant contributions, which really transformed Plant & Food into the impactful organisation that it is today and will continue to be under the new Bioeconomy Science Institute banner. So thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
And thank you out there for listening. If you'd like to know more about the topics covered on Sigest, check out the episode pages on the Plant & Food Research website. Please also subscribe to or follow the Sigest channel and rate and review each episode. Why not give it 5 stars? Thank you and mā te wā.